The mirror didn't lie, it never did. As I stood there in a white wedding gown, my hands trembled, not because it was my big day, but because it wasn't his. 2 years ago, I stood in front of a different mirror, smaller, cracked, and covered with tear stains. That was the night Derek told me, "You're not pretty enough to be my wife." Those words didn't just break my heart. They buried the girl I used to be. But standing here today, I see her reflection again, stronger, softer, reborn. My heart doesn't ache anymore when I think of him. It only beats louder for the woman I've become. He said I wasn't pretty enough. Now he's sitting in the audience, watching me walk down the aisle, not toward him, but toward a new life. And for the first time, I realized, beauty was never something I needed to prove. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about rediscovering yourself when someone tries to convince you that you're less than what you are. Because sometimes, the most beautiful thing you can ever do is love yourself enough to let go. Before I continue this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been told you weren't enough? Not smart enough? Not pretty enough? Not rich enough? Not their type? If you have, then this story, my story, is for you. Because sometimes, life gives us pain not to destroy us, but to push us toward who we were always meant to be. So, if you love real stories about love, heartbreak, and transformation, stories that remind you of your own strength, please take a moment right now. Speech balloon, leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Red heart # hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated and rose above it. Bell, subscribe if you believe that one day, your story will inspire someone else. This isn't just a story about a man who said I wasn't pretty enough to be his wife. It's about how those words shaped me, tested me, and led me somewhere I never imagined I'd go. Because the truth is, beauty fades, trends change, but character and grace will always outshine everything else. So, lean in close. Stay with me till the end. Because what happened after those painful words will make you believe that every ending can become a beautiful beginning. My name is Elena Parker, 29 years old, born and raised in Dallas, Texas. If you asked anyone about me 2 years ago, they'd probably say I was quiet, always smiling, and always helping someone. By day, I worked as a nurse at Dallas Mercy Hospital. By night, I took care of my mother, who'd been battling heart failure. I didn't have a fancy life. No designer bags. No dream vacations. Just long shifts, bus rides, and late-night prayers that one day, life would be kinder. Then came Derek Cole, the man who would change everything. Derek was everything I wasn't: bold, confident, handsome, and successful. He owned a small tech startup that was suddenly attracting investors. When he walked into a room, people noticed. When he smiled, hearts followed. He lived in a glass-walled apartment downtown, the kind you only see in magazines. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment with flickering lights and the sound of my mother's oxygen machine. I never thought our paths would cross. People like Derek belonged to a world far from mine. But fate has a strange sense of humor. It loves to mix opposites and see what happens. Back then, love wasn't on my mind. I was just surviving, patching up wounds, both mine and others. I had no idea that soon, I'd find myself falling for someone who would first make me feel like the luckiest woman alive. And then, like I was never enough. But that's how love stories begin, don't they? Soft, unexpected, and full of promises we're too innocent to doubt. It afternoons, the kind that made the air shimmer above the roads. The hospital was hosting a charity marathon, and I was assigned to the first aid tent. That's where I saw him for the first time, Derek Cole. He wasn't running to win, he was running to be seen. Cameras followed him, people cheered his name. He was the kind of man you noticed even if you tried not to. Tall, athletic, his confidence carried him like a brand. But halfway through the race, he collapsed near the finish line. The crowd gasped, and I ran toward him with my medical kit. His pulse was racing, his breathing shallow. "Sir, can you hear me?" I asked, kneeling beside him. He opened his eyes slowly, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Yeah," he whispered, "I just wanted a reason for a pretty nurse to touch me." I almost rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help smiling. That was Derek. Charming even while half unconscious. After checking his vitals and confirming he was fine, I told him to rest and drink water. He winked and said, "Only if you'll stay to watch me do it." I didn't think much of it until 2 days later. Derek showed up at the hospital with a bouquet of lilies, my favorite, though I never told him that. He claimed he came to thank me, but somehow, he stayed the whole afternoon, talking about everything and nothing. He was funny, confident, and kind in ways that felt real, or maybe I just wanted to believe they were. He asked about my dreams, and for the first time in years, someone listened like my words mattered. Before leaving, he said, "I'd like to see you again, Elena. Not in a hospital, but somewhere with better lighting." And that was how it started, with a fainting man, a bouquet of lilies, and a heart that didn't know it was walking straight into a storm. After that day, Derek didn't stop calling. At first, it was small things, checking in to ask how my day went, sending lunch to the hospital on my long shifts, or dropping by with coffee just because. I tried to resist him. Men like Derek didn't usually stay. But the more he showed up, the harder it became to ignore the way my heart softened every time he smiled. Our first real date was simple, a late-night drive through Dallas. The city lights painted our faces gold as he played soft jazz from his car speakers. "Do you always work this hard?" he asked, glancing at me. "Someone has to," I replied with a small laugh. He looked at me for a long time before saying, "You've got something most people don't, peace." Peace. No one had ever said that to me before. That night, he took me to a small diner on the edge of town. We ate pancakes at midnight and laughed until our cheeks hurt. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not for how I looked, but for who I was. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Derek started bringing me around his friends, introducing me proudly. But I could feel their judgment in the way their eyes lingered too long on my plain dress or my simple hair. They were all polished, designer clothes, flawless makeup, perfect smiles. I wasn't any of that. Still, when Derek looked at me, none of it mattered. He'd hold my hand in public, take photos of us, and tell me, "You're mine, Lena. Don't ever doubt that." And I believed him. We spent weekends by the lake, talking about life and plans. He wanted to expand his business. I wanted to start a small clinic for single mothers. He said he admired my heart, that it was what drew him in. Sometimes, he'd tease me gently about my simple clothes or my lack of interest in social media. I'd laugh it off, not realizing that those jokes were tiny cracks forming in the wall we were building. But when we were together, really together, it felt like nothing else existed. His arms were my home, his voice my calm. He'd whisper, "You're different, Lena. You make me feel human." I didn't know then that sometimes people love you for the light you give until they start craving a different kind of glow. For now, I was his peace. For now, I was enough. But love, I would learn, changes faster than we expect. The shift began slowly, so slowly I almost missed it. Derek was changing. His startup had exploded overnight after signing a big contract with an investor from New York. Suddenly, magazine features, interviews, and social events filled his calendar. He wasn't the man eating pancakes with me in a small diner anymore. He was becoming someone larger than life, and I was just trying to keep up. At first, I was proud. I wanted to see him win. But then, I started noticing the distance, not just in our schedules, but in his tone. One evening, I waited 2 hours at a restaurant for him. When he finally arrived, he didn't apologize. He just sat, adjusted his tie, and said, "Lena, you could have at least dressed up a little. This place is upscale." I looked down at my floral dress, one he used to say he loved. My smile faded. From that night on, everything started to feel like a test I kept failing. He began introducing me as a nurse friend instead of his girlfriend. At parties, he'd drift off to talk to women in sleek gowns and perfect makeup while I stood by the buffet, clutching my glass of water and my dignity. I told myself he was just stressed, that success was changing his world faster than he could handle. But one night, his words tore through me like glass. We had dinner at his new penthouse, glass walls, city lights everywhere. He was quiet the whole evening, barely looking at me. Finally, he set his glass down and said, "Lena, you're amazing, but I don't think we fit anymore." You're simple. And I need someone who matches where I'm going. I blinked, confused. What do you mean? He looked away, his jaw tightening. You're not pretty enough to be my wife. Not for the life I'm building. Those words hit harder than any slap. My heart stopped, but I forced a small smile. So that's what it's about. Looks. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, I walked out, no tears, no begging. Just silence. But when I got home, the silence broke into sobs. I cried until my voice disappeared. I wasn't angry at him, I was angry at myself for believing I ever needed his approval to feel beautiful. That night, I made a promise. One day, I'd look in the mirror and see someone more than enough, not for him, but for me. 2 years can change a person in ways love never could. After that night, I didn't see Derek again, not in person, at least. But every time his face showed up on TV or a magazine cover, a small ache tugged at my chest. Still, pain became my greatest teacher. I poured myself into work, not to forget him, but to rebuild me. I started volunteering at community clinics, recording short videos about self-care and confidence, mostly to encourage women who felt invisible. I didn't expect anyone to notice, but somehow, people did. One video went viral. Then another. Soon, I wasn't just Elena the nurse, I was Elena Parker, the health and healing voice who inspired thousands online. The more I spoke, the stronger I became. I changed my look, not for validation, but as a reflection of the peace I finally felt inside. And then one day, I got an email that made my heart skip. Invitation, Dallas Women in Leadership Conference, keynote speaker, Elena Parker. I almost cried reading it. But what made my hands tremble was the sponsor list at the bottom. Coltech Innovations. Derek's company. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was there for my message, not my past. But the moment I walked onto that stage, and the spotlight hit my face, I saw him. He was sitting in the front row, suit pressed, jaw tight, eyes wide. For a split second, the old pain whispered in my chest, but then, something else rose above it, pride. I spoke with every ounce of strength I'd gained. I talked about how women are taught to shrink to fit others' definitions of beauty, when the truth is, confidence is the most beautiful thing you can ever wear. As I finished, the room erupted in applause. And there he was, still staring. But this time, his eyes didn't hold superiority, they held regret. After the event, he approached me. Elena, he said softly, you look incredible. You've changed. I smiled politely. No, Derek. I just remembered who I was before you made me forget. He laughed nervously. I was stupid, Lena. You were always more than enough. I met his gaze, calm, steady. You were right about one thing, I said. We didn't fit. But not because I wasn't pretty enough, because your heart wasn't brave enough. And with that, I walked away, leaving him standing there, lost in the silence of his own choices. The day after the conference, I woke up to hundreds of messages from women across the country thanking me for sharing my story. But one message stood out. It was from Derek. Can we talk? Just one last time. Part of me hesitated, but another part, the one that had learned forgiveness doesn't always mean weakness, agreed. We met at a small cafe, the same one where we'd once planned our future together. It looked the same, but everything between us had changed. He was already there when I walked in, suit pressed, hair perfect, that same confident smile. Only this time, it didn't reach his eyes. Elena, he said, standing to greet me. You look amazing. I smiled softly. Thank you. You look the same. He chuckled awkwardly. You really did it. Everything you said you wanted, you made it happen. I nodded. I had to. I didn't have anyone else to believe in me, so I started believing in myself. He looked down, sighing. I was an idiot. I let my pride ruin something real. You were everything I needed, but I was too shallow to see it. There was a time when those words would have healed me. But now, they only sounded like echoes from a life I'd already outgrown. I'm not angry anymore, Derek, I said quietly. You were a chapter, not my ending. You taught me that love without respect is just decoration. He swallowed hard, his voice low. Do you ever think we could start over? I smiled sadly. No. Because I already have, just not with you. We sat in silence for a moment, the air thick with everything left unsaid. Then I stood up, left a few dollars on the table, and said, "Take care of yourself." As I walked out, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from forgiving. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky gold. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "You were always enough, Lena. Always." That night, I posted a message online that read, "The people who break you are sometimes the same ones who build you, not through love, but through lessons." And as I watched the comments flood in from women who saw themselves in my words, I knew my story wasn't about losing love. It was about finding myself. Looking back now, I don't hate Derek. In fact, I thank him, because without his rejection, I might never have discovered my worth. Sometimes, life uses heartbreak to wake us up. When he told me I wasn't pretty enough to be his wife, what he really meant was that he wasn't strong enough to love a woman beyond her looks. It took me time, tears, pain, silence, to understand that my value was never meant to be measured by someone else's opinion. Pretty fades. Trends change. But kindness, confidence, and peace, those never go out of style. For a long time, I tried to fit into his world. But now, I'm building mine, one where love feels safe, where words heal instead of hurt, where I never have to shrink myself to be chosen. If you've ever been told you're not enough, listen to me, you are. You were never lacking. You were simply standing in front of someone who couldn't see your light. Real love won't ask you to be prettier, richer, or smaller. It'll just ask you to be you, fully and freely. And when that love finally finds you, it won't sound like, "You're not enough." It'll sound like, "I've been waiting for someone just like you." If you've watched this far, I want to say something from my heart to yours. Maybe someone once told you that you weren't pretty enough, smart enough, or good enough to be loved. Maybe they made you doubt your worth. But I want you to know you are not defined by what they said. You are defined by how you rise after they say it. This story isn't just mine, it's ours. It's for every woman who turned pain into purpose, who chose peace over proving themselves. Speech balloon, if you've ever been through something like this, share your story in the comments. Red heart #tap that like button if you believe real beauty starts within. Bell, and don't forget to subscribe if you love stories that remind you to never settle for less than you deserve. Because sometimes, the people who say you aren't enough are the same ones who'll wish they'd never let you go. So keep shining. Keep loving. And remember, you were always more than enough.